Click, subscribe, and hit that bell notification. Ecclesiastes chapter 2. So, chapter 1 is more of a philosophical reasoning. The author in chapter 1 has said, everything's useless. There's just nothing in this world, there's nothing in this life that is all that useful. If it is not eternal, it is useless. So he talks about being under the sun in the domain of man and under the domain of the human life on this planet. Everything is vanity and chasing after wind. And so this is going to come up more and more as we move through the book. Under the sun, under heaven, vanity, chasing after wind, it's all useless. Those concepts don't go away for the majority of the book. But what he's going to do in chapter 2 is he's going to say, okay, I found that there was some things lacking in my life, so I wanted to try a new approach. I wanted to do this. Is this life like that people live over here that I see and I idolize, is that life worth living? No, it's not. So then what about this life over here? What if I apply myself to do these things? And so the concept that he's talking about is how he tested himself. He said, okay, I'm going to use wisdom and I'm going to try drugs. I'm going to use wisdom and I'm going to try workaholicism. I'm going to use wisdom and I'm going to get into sensuality and hedonism. I'm going to keep my mind and my heart alert, but I'm going to try this lifestyle. And does it fulfill? Does it bring the promises that I think it will bring? Guess what his results are? They don't. They don't fulfill. And that's what he's going to talk about. And what he says is, I kept my wits about me. So he's like, I tried to bring joy with alcohol. And then he caveats. And he's like, I kept my wits though. He walked down a path far enough to understand it and to realize the value of that path. So he says in verse 1, I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But behold, this also was vanity. So who is he talking about? I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. He's talking to himself. Exactly. He's reasoning in his mind and he's saying, I'm going to test myself and see, is there validity in this? Enjoy yourself. What does that mean to enjoy yourself? Test you with pleasure and enjoyment. Seek out whatever is pleasurable, right? Entertainment, physical activity with other people, exercise, whatever it is. He's just saying, hey, I want to just enjoy life. I want to enjoy pleasure. This is hedonism. I just want to have the experience of the tantalizing of the flesh. Trying to make myself feel as good and as pleasurable as possible. I'm going to test myself. Come now, he says. And then his results, what is it? This too is vanity. All right, so pleasure is vanity. Verse 2, I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? So laughter is madness. I think we see this. There's a stereotype for like an evil person in a movie. And what do evil people do? They always laugh. They always got the evil laugh. So it's interesting that he applies laughter in a term of madness or like craziness. It's very nuanced. Like it can mean a couple different things. And I found it translated madness consistently here. And we know that because he goes on and he talks about pleasure. What use is it? Or it's useless. So it's not a positive thing because it can be used for marriage. Right? It's interesting. But so he says, I gave myself to the laugh factory. I gave myself to comedy. I gave myself to just trying to always be happy and a positive attitude. And you know what I found with that? It's crazy. It's madness. Always trying to be happy, always trying to laugh your way through life and enjoy the pleasure and always be positive and have kind of that mentality of life. It's useless. It doesn't result in anything. He tested himself with pleasure, found that madness is in laughter. In verse 3, he says, I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine. What does that mean? I searched with my heart. So people turn to the drink to feel good. and then it makes them feel worse, and then to forget their ailment. So what's interesting is historically, alcohol has been used for lots of things. It's been used just to get drunk, just to be a drunkard, but that's always, every culture has had substance abuse, and it's always been frowned upon. And then you have like pharmaceuticals or medicinal purposes, right? So alcohol would be used to settle your stomach, as Paul would say to Timothy. So alcohol has a large spectrum of use and purpose. And I think what he's getting at is, yes, he's using it for recreational use, just to kind of party, socialize, whatever it might be. But he takes it a step further by trying to induce a state of being. He's trying to find how a substance can enlighten and gratify his life. And I call this guided pharmaceuticals, because this is what we do in our culture, and this is what every culture has done throughout time. How can we find a compound and implement that compound into our body to produce the life that we desire, right? We want to be happy. Well, how can I find a pill that makes me happy? How can I find a substance that will produce a lifestyle that I want? And so he talks about, I search with my heart how to cheer my body with wine, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, right? He's like, I wasn't given over to alcoholism or drunkenness to just get drunk all the time for no real purpose. He's like, I really want to test and see, can I build a healthy lifestyle around this? And then he says, and how to lay hold of folly, till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of our life. Well, yeah, but how can he live the good life? We all have this idea about the perfect life for us. There's lots of lifestyles to live in our country and in our world, and we all think that this lifestyle over here would be the best. A lot of people, it's smoking pot, drinking alcohol, taking pills, and doing mushrooms, and living this life of substance. We would call that abuse, substance abuse. But then for other people like him, he's like, okay, well, I just want to go and I'm going to get laid, and then I'm going to go watch movies, and I'm just going to have my best life now. I'm going to go to Hawaii, and I'm just going to cruise on a beach. That's what he talked about first, was pleasure, entertainment. Then he gets into pharmaceuticals. He gets into living the life of that substance can bring to it. Why? The best life on earth. What is it? What is the most perfect life to be lived on the earth? You see this desire that he's going for? He's trying to find it. And I think all of us are trying to find it. When you're a teenager, you're like, oh man, I know what it is. It's going to be getting that smoking hot babe, or getting that dude, or getting that car, or getting that job. Like, there's this picture of the future that we so desire as being perfect. And so you pursue it, and you're like, you know what? She wasn't all that great, or that guy was not really what I thought he would be, or that car eventually is breaking down and I don't really want it anymore. So what is it? I need the next best thing. For me, I did lots of drugs in high school as a young kid. Drugs were my thing. And then I was like, you know what? Drugs are vanity. Drugs are useless. They're worse than useless. They're very damaging, to be fair. But then what did I pursue? Now I'm pursuing my career and my job. And then what am I pursuing? Well, now I'm pursuing my family. There's this lifestyle that we pursue. And he is pointing out, step one was pleasure. Step two is trying to find substances that make you happy. And then step three, he says this in verse 4, I made great works. I built houses, planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forests of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I had also great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and treasures of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of men. So what did he do? He did everything. This was made famous by Rick Warren and I think Saddleback Church. So this is called the purpose-driven life. This is a life of impact. This is a life well lived in our society. You serve society and you make something of yourself and you make a name for yourself. And so what does he say? He says, I built buildings and I built houses and I built vineyards. Another way of saying that is, I built not only my personal life, I became an entrepreneur, right? So when they talk about slaves, I know this is a very sensitive subject in the modern era. When he talks about slaves, it's about having employees. These are people that work for me, that work under me. I provide their substance and they provide resources to me and my family and our household and our company and our business. So they clothe them and they house them and they feed them and they take care of them. And to be fair, slavery is slavery. Don't get me wrong, slavery is slavery. You give up your will either by force or by free will. So like I come to you and I say, hey, I'll work for you for 7 years and you take care of me for 7 years. That's a free will slavery. I have given and surrendered my will to yours. This is what we do with Jesus, right? We become slaves of Christ by surrendering our self-agency so that Jesus lives in us and his will is done through us, okay? So that's the slavery that we have to Christ. We have slavery to righteousness. That is the compulsion of the Christian to live a holy life. Now, the flip side of that is slaves were taken in battle. They were taken in territories that were overcome. Right? But this isn't supposed to be a dissertation on slavery, but he's saying, I procured an empire of people working for me, and I built forests of fruit. This is the Silicon Valley of his day. If you were the vineyard owner, if you owned all of the land, that all of the fruit and grain and all the produce gave to that society, you were Bill Gates. He starts with entrepreneurship. He builds his empire that feeds his resources and his money and all the stuff. And then he builds his family. Verse 8, he says, I gathered for myself silver, gold, treasures, provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines. Now, why would he say singers? Music was rare. Having a court gesture meant you were the king. If you had people to serenade you with entertainment, you were buku rich. Because normally there would be like the theater and everybody would go to the theater and you'd have to pay. But if you had them in your household and you employed them and everywhere you went there was wonderful music, I mean, how rich are you? This guy has reached the pinnacle of living. He's driving the Bugatti and he's living in the mansion and he's got a $1 billion yacht. Like this is that guy that you see on the tube or the talk. And they're doing all the things that you think like, oh man, if I only had that life. If I had that life, I'd be happy. And so what does he say? He says, I've done it. And this is what I found out. Verse 9, so I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me, and whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. So he says, I've been the greatest, I've arrived. And verse 10, this is the reward for all my toil. I never held back from enjoying the things that I earned. If my eyes wanted it, I took it. And that's, Solomon, right? With his 1,000 wives. If I wanted it, I took it. I did not hold back. And then he says, verse 11, then I considered all that my hands had done and the toil I had expended in doing it. Then I evaluated. This is where he keeps saying, I kept my wisdom with me. I kept my wisdom with me. And then after achieving it all, I stopped and I looked back and I reevaluated the situation. And he says, behold, all was vanity and a striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. It's very hard to be content when you continue to set your hope on this world. Everything in this world disappoints. If you set your hope on having the best spouse, on finding the best man, the best woman, and you say, okay, once I find this person, all of my needs will be met. They'll be my best friend. They'll never leave me. They'll always do the dishes. They'll pray with me. They're going to love Jesus. Everything I hope for is in this person. You know what you find? Disappointment. Because no person can truly satisfy. And then you do the same thing with your job, your career, your money, your house, your resources, your family, right? Some people are like, oh man, if I just had a better relationship with my mom, if I just had a better relationship with my dad or my kids and my son, like, this thing that bugs me. If I had this, right? If you set your hope under the sun, when you get what you wanted, you know what you find out? It's not worth anything. It's vanity. It's chasing after wind. You can never bottle it. That's hopeless. So after all of that, when you're Bill Gates, it's useless under the sun. Verse 12, right? Where do you go next after all of that? Well, he talks about it. I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly. So he kind of went back in a circle and he's like, okay, so if physical things aren't the goal, what about mental things? What if I'm just the smartest person in the room? More than that, what if I'm the smartest person in the country? Or you know what? What if I'm the wisest person on the planet? Or even better, the wisest person in history? What if I could obtain to all wisdom? So I turned to consider wisdom, madness, and folly. For what can the man do who comes after the king? Only what has already been done. So he says, if I were to be the best person on the planet, I would only be doing what others have done. There's nothing all that special or unique about me. It's already been done. You think you're the best leader? There's leaders better than you. You think you're the smartest? There's people smarter than you. Or even if you are the smartest, that makes you the smartest person out of all the dumb people. This was me. All my friends were losers. So I was the king of the losers. Did I fit in with the cool kids? Not at all. But I fit in with everybody else. So everybody liked me. This is the concept. You're only doing what everybody else has done before you. Verse 13. Then I saw that there is more gain in wisdom than folly, as there is more gain in light than in darkness. The wise person has eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. Okay, what is he talking about there? He's saying that there's a weakness to wisdom. If you hope in your intelligence and in your perception of the world that you can grasp, that hope will fade too. That's vanity. He talks about that in chapter 1. But he still affirms here that wisdom is better than folly. You see the homeless person on the street who's living that life that everybody wished that they could live, that carefree, do whatever you want, whenever you want kind of lifestyle. They made those choices that said, I'm going to enjoy my life now, and I don't care about the future. That guy is a fool. And I'll tell you what, wisdom is still better because he went down that path, right? He said, let me pursue folly. Let me pursue all of these bad things. And now I know that those things are still bad. Wisdom is still better than folly. Just like light, right? Working out during the day is better than working out at night. Hanging out with people during the day is better than hanging out with people at night, right? Daytime is better. That's why everything happens during the day and things don't happen during the night. Only bad things happen at night. So then he talks about that. And then he says, wise people have eyes in their skull. Why do you have eyes? So you can see. It's a blessing and a gift from God. If you didn't have eyes, it'd be a problem. You couldn't see. And so he contrasts that again. He says, wise people have eyes to see, and fools walk in darkness. And then he says, yet I perceived that the same events happen to them all. So this is where he starts to get a little despaired or disparaging. Look, it's better to be wise than to be a fool. But here's the thing. Bad things happen to both. Good things happen to both. And this is the vanity of it all. Do you remember Jesus talks about this in Luke chapter 13? He talks about the Tower of Siloam, how it fell and it killed some people. And Jesus says, were the people who died in that tragedy, in that accident, were they more sinners than people who lived? Because there's a concept that says, if you're righteous, bad things won't happen to you. But if you're not righteous, bad things will happen to you. It's punishment. And Joe, bad things are happening to you, so therefore you're a sinner. Or like karma, what goes around comes around, brah. But what Jesus said is, no, because if you don't repent, it'll be worse for you than it was for them. So let's look at the World Trade Centers. When the World Trade Center came down, do you think sinners died? Do you think saints died? It happened to both. good and bad. And this is what he's talking about. Look, it doesn't matter if you're wise or if you're a fool, because guess what? You're going to have children that are dirtbags. If you're righteous, you have bad kids. And you know what? If you're a fool, you can have good kids. It happens to both. Life, you are subjected to it. Life, we all live it. I perceive that it's better to be wise than to be a fool. But we all encounter the same issues. So he goes on, verse 15, then I said in my heart, he's pondering again, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For of the wise, as of the fool, there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all will have been long forgotten, how the wise dies just like the fool. So have I guys told you there's a hard way to learn lessons and there's an easy way to learn lessons? I tell my employees this. So what's the easy way to learn a lesson? Learn from somebody else. They tell you, you listen, and you gain wisdom by somebody else's knowledge. What's the hard way to learn a lesson? You make mistakes, you do it yourself, accidentally or by disobeying the direct information you were given, and you learn the hard way that was the bad choice or the right choice. Like you're saying, we all go through this where we test and we see, okay, well, I want to live this life and I think this life will pay off. I wish I had known Ecclesiastes before this, because he's living the life that we all think we should live. And he's coming back and he's telling us, hey, I've been down that road. It's a dead end. There is zero value in going down that path. It will not end in a place that you want to be in. You'll have to turn around, backtrack, and rebuild from there. Heed my advice is kind of the concept, right? Heed my advice. So he says, we all will end in the grave. So wise and fools are forgotten in the ground. We will all die. Now we have the hope of the resurrection. We have the New Testament theology of the rapture, the resurrection from the dead, the new body. That we have so much more hope than he could conceive of. He perceived through a dark glass that he couldn't really see clearly, but we see clearly. And so that hope of the resurrection, we will never be forgotten. Our names are written in the Lamb's book of life. Jesus has placed his name on us. We have a hope and a history to come. But these people didn't have that hope. So under the sun, without a resurrection, we all end up in the grave. Verse 17, so I hated life, because what is done under the sun was grievous to me, for all is vanity and striving after wind. So I hated life. Lost his purpose. I like it. That's a good way to put it. Because even having a worldly purpose is vain. Verse 18, he hated life. I hated all my toil, in which I toil under the sun. What is toil? Work. So he despairs of even building of the mansions and the vineyards and the getting the slaves. He's like, man, this is hard. I work and I work and I work. And what do I get? He says this, I hated my toil in which I toiled under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. Why? Why is he so disparaging? So the hard work that he does, right? Imagine that you worked for 65 years straight and you laid up $2 million for yourself. And you're thinking to myself, I can relax, I can be comfortable, and then you die. What happens to your money? You leave it behind. You give it to your predecessor. You give it to your kids. To him, he didn't work for it. I worked for it. It was my wisdom. It was my knowledge. It was my sweat. It was my blood. It was my heartache. It was my difficulty. And he gets the benefit of it? He's pretty bitter. Verse 19, and who knows whether he will be wise or a fool, yet he will be master of all for which I toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. This is also vanity. So wait. I'm the smartest. I'm the best. I'm the greatest. I give it to that guy and he ruins it. This is the story of Solomon and Rehoboam, his son. Solomon had peace from Egypt all the way to the Euphrates. Solomon was the emissary of Israel and made peace with all of their enemies and expanded their kingdom massively. And he left, and his son divided the country in days. There was a civil war, they divided, and literally Solomon's kingdom fell apart. And he's like, I don't know who I leave it to, a wise person or a fool. And yet, it's vanity. Verse 20, I turned around and gave my heart up to despair over all the toil of my labors under the sun. Because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This also is vanity and a great evil. 22, what has a man from all the toil and striving of heart with which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even in the night, his heart does not rest. This also is vanity. What does he mean by sorrow, vexation, and at night his heart does not rest? To toil and to labor. Remember how God put Adam in the garden? What did he tell Adam? Take care of the garden. We were created with a purpose, to be gardeners. But the garden tended pretty much to itself. It watered itself. It never died. And you know what it didn't have? Weeds. Didn't have weeds. No sweat of the brow. You know how we know that? Because the curse brought sweat of the brow. It brought thorns and thistles. So now when we talk about toil, it is not the toil that it was in the garden. It's toil that is sorrowful. It's toil that is a vexation. It's a toil that keeps you up at night. We call this, in our modern era, stress. Do you guys ever struggle going to sleep because you're thinking about work? It doesn't matter how hard your job is, right? You can have a simple job. Like there's times where I look at my employees and just wish, like, oh man, if I could just take a week off and do your job. But you know what? It's a toil for them. It's a toil for the guy who's running a shovel all the way up to the CEO, to the President of the United States. It's toil. It keeps you up at night. It's a stressful situation. And you do all of that. You live and suffer and go through the toil of life to make something profitable, and you just give it away to somebody who didn't earn it. So what is the definition of evil? It's the opposite of good. So God created, he said, this is good. This is the order, this is the design, this is the purpose, this is the intention, this is good. So what is evil is anything that contradicts what God calls good. So God did not design us to toil in vain. He did not design us to work for nothing. In fact, it's the opposite. He says, if you work for me, you gain riches in heaven. If you labor on earth, you'll store up treasures that'll rot, that'll be stolen or be eaten. But if you labor for eternal riches, you will have true treasures, eternal treasures, a wreath that will not wilt, a crown that will not rust. God has actually provided that work should bear eternal consequence. Now, if sin never entered the earth, if Adam and Eve never sinned, Adam and Eve would have never died, and their toil would have been eternal. Plants wouldn't die. No death would have been brought in. It would have been perfection all the way through. So God's plan is that we should have eternal riches. The evil is that riches have become temporary. And the riches that we pursue are not God's riches. So he says, there is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he has given the business of gathering and collecting, only to give to the one who pleases God. This also is vanity in striving after wind. He changes his tune here. He enlightens us with some really good truth that we needed. I think it's a solve because it's like a balm to like a burning heart. I think we all relate to what he's talking about in the suffering of toil. And then he gets to verse 24 and he says this, there is nothing better than what? Nothing better than what? Eat, drink, and enjoy your job. Enjoy your work. And I think what he's doing is he's bringing us back and he's saying, look, enjoy the simple things. Don't make it so complicated. I've taken the complicated road. I thought I could design my life. I thought I could live, the purpose-driven life or design the pleasurable life that brings all enjoyment and peace and happiness. I thought I could pursue happiness and find it. And you know what I got? Vanity. So here it is. If you want to know the perfect life, enjoy the small things. Eat, drink, enjoy your food, enjoy your water, and find enjoyment in your job, in your labor. Everything we do, going to Bible study, going to church, reading your Bible, that's all toil. That's work. Learn to love it. Your kids screaming at you, causing problems, failing in school, loving you, giving you a big old hug, saying you're the best. Enjoy it. When you're at work and you're having a tough time and you got that customer, total sweetheart of a person, love them. Enjoy the moment. If you're getting chewed out and you're feeling bad, enjoy it. Life is short. Sometimes the suffering's good for us. He brings us back down to center and say, you know what? Find contentment in the things that you're doing. Because if you're striving after all of these things and you think your job is going to make you rich and you think that you're going to find happiness by if you just have a couple more drinks or take more drugs or find more women or find a couple more guys, if you think that's going to satisfy you, it won't. Can I ask you a favor? If you enjoyed this Bible study, if you were blessed by God, can you click that subscribe button so that more people can hear the gospel and dig into the scriptures? I appreciate it, and may the Lord keep you and bless you. So take your expectations, settle them back down, and enjoy your food and the sweat of your brow. Don't pursue so much the future that you want to build. Find out what the hand of God is giving you. Because this is what he says. Enjoyment for toil, for this I saw is from the hand of God. What does it mean, the hand of God? His provision? It's his gift. I'm giving you a hand. I'm providing you a gift through my hands. I am giving you something. God has bundled up some blessings and some joy and some happiness for you, and he's delivering it to you. And that's to enjoy your life wherever it is. The good, the bad, the ups, the downs. Be content. So he goes on and he talks about in verse 25, why? For apart from God, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? There's no joy but in the Lord. So what he says in verse 26, for to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom, knowledge, and what? Joy. You notice he's never said that before. He always says wisdom and knowledge, wisdom and knowledge, wisdom and knowledge. But then he says, you know what? When you receive the good things from God's hand, you get wisdom and you get knowledge and joy. But to sinners, now this is interesting because you think at this point, he's like, oh, vanity of vanity, wisdom's good, folly's kind of bad. No, he's saying like there's a right way and there's a wrong way to live. And listen, if you're a sinner and you are living against God, you are gathering up and collecting so that God can take it away from you and give it to somebody else. To give it to the person who pleases him. Do you remember the parable of the talents? The king says, hey, I'm going to give you 1, I'm going to give you 5, and I'm going to give you 10. Or I think it's 1, 2, and 5. And he's do business, right? I'm going to leave, and when I come back, and you do business. And so what he does is he's got the 10, and he doubled and he tripled. And then he's got the 2, and he doubled and he tripled. And he looks at the 1 who gathered, but he was a sinner. And he says, you know what? You're not worthy to even have the 1, you wicked sinner. So he takes what was given to the sinner and then he gives it to those he's already given to. The one who has will receive more. And the one, even what he does have, will be taken away. So God's grace towards sinners is this common grace. They get to breathe. They get to eat. They get to drink. They get to work. They get to have families. They get to enjoy life. Even if life is hard, they are given good things by God. But those are all temporary because they will lose it. God will take it from them and give it to the one who pleases him. And to the one who pleases him, he gives what? Wisdom, knowledge, and joy. What are some applications we can take away from this? So, pharmaceuticals, useless. Recreational drugs, useless. Alcohol, pot, pills, mushrooms, useless. It's vanity. I like, somebody told me this. They said, when you do drugs, it does give you happiness momentarily, like most sin. You feel good, you feel happy in the moment, but you're stealing from your future self. So that momentary happiness is increased drastically 3 or 4 times what you normally would feel because you're doing the drugs, but you're stealing all of that happiness from yourself in the future. I don't think I know a single drug addict or person who does drugs that is actually all that happy. Living to work or working to live. Living to work is worthless. If you live just to get money and to gain the riches of this world, if you work to gain notoriety and find your meaning in life, and believe me, I've been there. I'm still there, okay? I've reached a really high level of my career field. And at the top, it's vanity. I promise you, it's vanity. And after you fought and you crawled and you sacrificed and you've cried and you bled and you get to the top, you know what you get? An attaboy. Or you get to walk around with a title on your shirt that says you're the man, you're the best. And if you live for that title that says that you're the best, it's useless. It's vanity. But we can enjoy our work, we can find joy in labor, and realize that it's from God. It's His hand that has provided us this opportunity to work, this opportunity to eat and to drink and to have kids and a family. Enjoy the small stuff. Make the sacrifices that count. Do what really is meaningful in life and serve Jesus. Next week, chapter 3, seasons. Chapter 3, seasons. There's a season for everything.